This is Josh Nelson with Nelson Elder Care Law, helping you protect yourself and your loved ones. Today, we're going to be talking about powers of attorney and why you and your loved ones both need one. A lot of people think that a power of attorney is a power of attorney is a power of attorney. Unfortunately, whenever they start caring for somebody that's going through a crisis, they find out that a power of attorney is not a commodity. Just because it says power of attorney on the top doesn't mean that it does exactly the same thing as another power of attorney. We're going to start by building a little bit of a foundation, and then we're going to start talking about what you need to have in your power of attorney, and then we're going to talk about what the power of attorney does to protect you whenever you're acting as somebody's agent. So this is whenever somebody else gives you authority through a power of attorney. Stay tuned today with Live with a Lawyer so we can answer any questions you might have about power of attorney. And as always, if you have other questions later, don't hesitate to give us a call and set up your free strategy session so we can help you and your loved ones get a solid plan. I'm Josh Nelson, one of the attorneys with the Nelson Elder Care Law. Whenever we start talking about powers of attorney in Georgia, they're broken into two categories. First, we want to be clear that a durable power of attorney, a general power of attorney, and a financial power of attorney are all the name for the same thing in Georgia. If that's the title, it doesn't matter whether or not it's for health, that's an advanced healthcare directive, or a medical power of attorney, which is a term no longer used in Georgia. So today we're just talking about contracts and money. Whenever you see the word durable with a power of attorney, what it's talking about is in the event that that person that allowed you to step into their shoes can no longer make their own choices, you still can. If it is not a durable power of attorney, whenever the person that granted you that authority loses capacity, you lose your ability to act. That's kind of scary. Don't worry though, even if the name of your tool doesn't say durable power of attorney, there should be a paragraph in it that talks about durability, or the fact that it still works even whenever the grantor of the authority no longer can make their own decisions, such as being in a coma, having cognitive impairment, or choosing not to. I want to be clear that all powers of attorney in Georgia cease to work whenever the originator passes away. You cannot use a power of attorney that you have for mom or dad to move funds after they've died. That would be fraud. One of the big things to look for in a power of attorney is whether or not it's springing, which means that there's an event in the future that makes it work, or whether or not it's effective immediately. For practical purposes, it's really good for it to be effective immediately. Sometimes, whenever we draft powers of attorney, we'll do that it's effective immediately to the spouse, and then there's a springing power to somebody else. If you're not using a spouse or a child as your agent, you might want it to be springing. But here are the things that tend to be a problem with that. What is the springing event? Often, powers of attorney will say, my agent cannot act unless I'm incapacitated. How do we define that? In Georgia, often the power of attorney will require two physicians, not just one, but two, to say the grantor is incapacitated. Doctors are pretty liability adverse, and so getting a doctor, let alone two, to sign for this is hard. The other option is a court can say that they're incompetent, and that really undoes some of the planning because you're trying to avoid court processes. And then lastly, there's usually a certification that you can sign that you can have notarized that allows for your agent to act. This is the most common one, but it's really important to understand that if you are incapacitated, if you are in a coma after a bad accident, or you do have Alzheimer's, or you do have something that's keeping you from being able to act on your own, how are you going to get a notary to you? How are you going to be able to sign this thing in front of a notary to make it work? Remember, the governor took away our power to do that virtually, so you got to do it in person now. Your attorney can get through a lot of the restrictions that a notary can't, but again, we want to make a plan that works as burden-free as possible in the future. And so that's why generally we'll talk clients through why it's best to have it effective immediately. One of the other things to look for in your power of attorney is what powers it really grants. A lot of powers of attorney at the very end will say, and all other legal things. The problem with that is whenever a non-lawyer reads that, they often think that means and everything else. But there are a couple things that it has to expressly say in order for you to be able to do. Those things are change beneficiaries, sell land, which most power of attorneys do. But one of the big ones that we often find is problematic is the ability to act as a fiduciary. And so that means things like a trust. Let me shut it off.
Where is it?
So if we start talking about a trust or creation of a trust, we want to make sure that we aren't in the spot where the power of attorney didn't give your agent authority to do that. Clearly making sure that your agent has the authority to sell land, change beneficiaries, manage accounts, and create trusts are often things that you'll need to do if you're in crisis planning or trying to preserve assets for the state. By making sure that you have the authority necessary to do that, it can make sure that your family has less stress and less burden in the future. Lastly, you want to make sure that it's executed properly. So remember that in the state of Georgia, it needs to have 2 witnesses, and if you want it to be able to work for selling land, it has to be notarized. You also want to make sure that your agent, the person you gave the authority to, has signed saying that they'll act as a fiduciary for you. Remember that your agent, or the power of attorney, is actually forced to act in your best interest, even over their own. That's what makes a power of attorney so special. One of the things that a power of attorney can do that a lot of people don't think about is limit the liability for the agent. Often with families that we work with, throughout some time in their lives, they'll end up at a hospital or a caravan. Whenever you go through and you're looking at some of these packets, so let's talk about, for example, maybe mom ends up in an emergency room, you're the first one to show up there, and somebody from the hospital approaches you with a packet, usually 5 to 10 pages long, and says, "Mom can't sign this. I'd like for you to sign it to make sure we can care for her." And you're flustered and stressed, having one of the worst days of your life, and so you say yes. Then you go ahead and sign it just your normal name. What a lot of people don't realize is buried in there is often what's called a financial responsibility clause that says if mom or her insurance are unable to pay, they can come after you personally. This can be quite frightening for people. One of the ways around this is if you're power of attorney, you can sign your name, so Josh Nelson, as agent for my mom, Cindy Nelson. And then if something happens where her insurance or she is unable to pay, because I was only acting under her authority given to me as an agent, they can't come back on me personally. That's pretty cool. These are the things that an elder law attorney will help you look at to make sure that you have a complete plan and that you know how to avoid some of these curveballs of life. If you are worried about your power of attorney, if you need better peace of mind, if it was something that you just had done years ago and you're not sure that it works, give us a call. Again, this is Josh Nelson with Nelson Elder Care Law, live with a lawyer every Wednesday, helping you learn what you need to know and answering your questions as you submit them so that you can avoid some of these curveballs of life. Thanks so much and join us next Wednesday.